She opened her wallet and froze. 5 crumpled dollars, a trembling hand, and a blind date she couldn't afford to leave. At the next table, a quiet man with tired eyes noticed everything, and what he chose to do would change both their lives forever. If you love stories that restore faith in kindness, like this video and subscribe to Soul of Kindness, your support keeps these stories alive. She opened her wallet and felt her breath catch, the sound of the cafe fading into a dull hum, as she stared at the 5 crumpled dollars lying inside like a quiet accusation. Because this was supposed to be a new beginning, a blind date arranged by a friend who promised that sometimes life surprised you when you least expected it. Yet here she was, Lina Carter, 22, unemployed for the 3rd time in a year, sitting alone at a small round table near the window with rain streaking down the glass and hope thinning with every second. The cafe smelled of roasted beans and warm bread, the kind of comfort she rarely allowed herself to imagine, and she chose the cheapest tea on the menu, apologizing softly to the barista as if ordering anything at all was an inconvenience. While around her couples laughed, phones buzzed, and plates clinked in a rhythm that made her feel invisible. Except she wasn't invisible to the man at the next table, a broad-shouldered figure in a simple jacket with sleeves rolled up, eyes marked by exhaustion and gentleness. The kind of man who had learned to carry responsibility without letting it harden him, Ethan Hale. A single father waiting for his daughter's piano lesson to finish across the street. A CEO by profession but a dad by choice, who had come here seeking quiet and found himself watching a story unfold. Lina checked her phone again. No message, no apology. Then practiced a polite smile she didn't feel because she'd learned early that kindness was often expected from those who had the least. And when her blind date finally arrived late and loud, glancing at her tea with a smirk and joking about splitting everything evenly, her stomach tightened, her fingers curling around the warm cup as if it could anchor her while he talked about his ambitions, his standards, his belief that effort equaled worth, never noticing how she shrank with each word, never asking what she did or what she dreamed, and Ethan noticed all of it, the way Lina nodded too quickly, the way she slid the menu aside without ordering, the way pride and panic wrestled behind her eyes. Because he had once been poor too, once counted coins and courage in equal measure, once learned how quickly people judged what they didn't understand. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming against the awning like a warning. And when Lina excused herself to the restroom to steady her breathing, the date checked his phone, frowned, and stood abruptly, leaving a few bills on the table that didn't quite cover the check, muttering about wasting time. And when Lina returned to find the empty chair and the unpaid receipt, the room seemed to tilt, humiliation burning her cheeks as she calculated again. $5, a bill larger than dignity would allow, and the familiar choice between asking for help and disappearing quietly. A choice she had made too many times. She rose, smoothing her thrift store dress, rehearsing an apology she'd say to the barista, when a chair scraped softly nearby and Ethan stood, not rushing, not announcing himself, just stepping into the moment with a calm that felt like safety, telling the barista he'd take care of the check as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And Lina tried to protest, voice thin, but he met her eyes with a gentle steadiness that said, this wasn't charity and it wasn't pity. It was simply right. He paid, thanked the staff, then gestured to the window seat, offering it to her with a small smile and a comment about the rain being kinder when you watched it from somewhere bright. And Lina hesitated before sitting, unsure why she trusted him, but grateful all the same, the warmth of the seat and the quiet respect in his presence easing something tight inside her chest. For a moment they said nothing, the cafe breathing around them, until Ethan asked about her day in a way that invited truth rather than demanded it, and she surprised herself by answering honestly, telling him about the blind date. Without drama, about job applications unanswered, about learning how to stretch a dollar and a dream, while he listened without interrupting, without fixing, his attention a gift she hadn't known she needed. Across the street, a little girl waved excitedly through the glass, and Ethan's face softened instantly as he waved back, explaining with a warmth that made Lina smile despite herself that his daughter was finishing her lesson, and in that small exchange Lina saw not a savior or a stranger, but a man who knew responsibility and chose kindness anyway. They spoke of ordinary things, books that felt like home, routines that healed, the courage it took to show up when life had taught you to expect disappointment. And when Ethan mentioned his work, he did so without titles, without pride, just facts folded into conversation. And Lina didn't ask more, because it didn't matter. Not in that moment. When the rain eased and Ethan stood to leave, he placed a simple card on the table, telling her it was an invitation for coffee another day, no pressure, no expectations, just a door left open. And as he walked out to meet his daughter, Lina held the card with hands that no longer shook, realizing that the evening hadn't ended with loss after all, that sometimes the smallest kindness at the right moment could restore something you didn't know you'd lost. And as she watched the rain slow to a gentle mist, she felt a fragile but real sense of possibility take root, unaware that this quiet encounter, born from $5, a blind date gone wrong, and a man who chose to notice, was only the beginning of a story that would change both their lives. The next morning, Lina woke with the strange feeling that something gentle had brushed past her life and left a mark she couldn't quite name. And as she sat on the edge of her narrow bed in the small room she rented, the memory of the cafe replayed itself with surprising clarity. The sound of rain, the warmth of the cup, the calm in a stranger's voice. And for a moment she wondered if she had imagined it, until her fingers found the simple card tucked carefully inside her wallet, its edges already soft from being touched too often, and she let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Days passed, slow and heavy, filled with job applications, interviews that went nowhere, and the quiet resilience that had become her routine. Yet something inside her had shifted, because she walked a little straighter, smiled a little more easily, as if the memory of being seen had reminded her that she still mattered. And on the third day, after pacing her room and arguing with her doubts, she dialed the number on the card, nearly hanging up before it connected. But when Ethan answered with that same calm warmth, relief flooded her chest, and they agreed to meet for coffee. No pressure, just conversation. The cafe they chose was smaller, brighter, and when Lina arrived early, she realized she wasn't counting coins this time, not because her situation had changed, but because fear no longer sat so loudly in her thoughts. And when Ethan walked in, wearing that same simple jacket, she noticed how ordinary he seemed, how intentionally unremarkable, as if he preferred blending into life rather than standing above it. And their conversation flowed with an ease that surprised them both, touching on books, childhood memories, and the quiet courage it took to keep going when life didn't reward effort right away. Ethan spoke openly about Mia, about learning how to pack lunches, attend school meetings and balance work with bedtime stories, and Lina listened with genuine admiration, seeing in him not wealth or power but consistency and care, while Ethan, in turn, listened to Lina talk about her mother's sacrifices, about leaving school to help at home, about dreams deferred but not erased, and the honesty between them felt rare, unforced, like two people finally allowed to speak without masks. Over the following weeks, their meetings became a gentle rhythm, sometimes just coffee, sometimes walks in the park where Mia ran ahead laughing, quickly deciding that Lina was someone she trusted, someone who listened to her stories with the seriousness children deserved. And Lina found herself drawn into a world that felt stable without being restrictive, a place where kindness wasn't loud or conditional, and yet doubts lingered, especially when Lina accidentally overheard a conversation at a nearby table one afternoon, someone mentioning Ethan Hale's company, the numbers attached to his name, the respect he commanded, and the truth settled over her like sudden cold rain, making her feel exposed, foolish for not knowing, insecure about what she had to offer in comparison. That evening she confronted him gently, asking why he hadn't told her, and Ethan answered without defensiveness, explaining that he had learned long ago how titles distorted relationships, how people either wanted something from him or assumed he wanted control, and that with her he wanted simplicity, honesty, and choice. words that softened Lina's fears even as they stirred new ones, because choosing meant risking loss, and loss was something she knew too well. Still, life continued, and one afternoon Ethan asked if she'd like to visit the community center where he volunteered on weekends, a place that provided after-school programs and tutoring. And when Lina stepped inside, hearing the buzz of children reading aloud, struggling and succeeding in equal measure, something inside her clicked, because this was where her patience and empathy belonged, and she began volunteering then. Helping regularly, discovering a sense of purpose that steadied her even as her bank balance stayed thin. Ethan noticed the light returning to her eyes, the way she stood taller among the kids, and instead of stepping in, he stepped back, letting her build something on her own terms, offering encouragement without direction. And when Lina finally found part-time work through the center, earning just enough to breathe a little easier, the pride she felt was entirely her own. Challenges still came, missed buses, rejected applications, moments when Lina wondered if she was holding Ethan back, and nights when Ethan questioned whether opening his carefully balanced life to someone else was fair to Mia. But each doubt was met with conversation rather than silence, patience rather than pressure, and in small, ordinary ways, trust grew. One rainy evening, echoing their first meeting, they returned to the original cafe. And Lina noticed how different she felt sitting there now, how the tables no longer seemed like barriers, how the room felt accessible instead of intimidating. And as she ordered with quiet confidence, Ethan watched her with a soft smile, not because she needed him, but because she didn't. And as the rain traced familiar patterns down the window, Lina realized that kindness hadn't solved her problems, but it had given her the courage to keep facing them, and that courage, slowly but surely, was changing the direction of her life, even if neither of them yet understood just how deeply their paths were becoming intertwined. Weeks turned into months, and Lina found herself navigating a life she never thought possible, one stitched together with small victories and quiet moments of joy that had once felt out of reach, and the card Ethan had given her that first night became a symbol of possibility, not just a reminder of a debt paid or a gesture extended, because it had opened a door into a world where she could finally breathe without the weight of constant fear pressing on her chest. And as she continued volunteering at the community center, helping children who struggled with reading and homework, she noticed how her confidence grew alongside the kids, how her patience and care shaped their progress and gave her a sense of pride she hadn't felt in years, while Ethan remained a steady presence, not imposing, not overbearing, but watching quietly as Lina found herself again, gently encouraging her when she doubted, and celebrating even the smallest accomplishments with a warmth that felt natural, effortless, and completely genuine. They met often, sometimes just for coffee, sometimes for walks in the park with Mia, who had already decided Lina was someone to trust, someone who made life brighter and easier to navigate. And it wasn't long before Lina realized she was no longer merely surviving, she was growing, and she owed that growth to a combination of her own determination and the quiet, consistent support Ethan offered without fanfare or expectation. And the dynamic between them slowly evolved, from strangers connected by circumstance to companions linked by respect and empathy, and eventually to something tender and unspoken that neither wanted to rush but both felt with every glance and every conversation. One afternoon, after a particularly long session helping a struggling child sound out a paragraph, Lina found herself laughing genuinely at a joke Mia made, and Ethan's smile mirrored hers, not out of charm or duty, but because he too was learning how much joy could be found in small, ordinary moments shared with people who mattered. And it was in these moments that Lina began to see Ethan not as a wealthy CEO or as a man who could solve her problems, but simply as a man who had chosen to see her fully, without judgment or expectation, and that choice was far more valuable than any financial security could ever provide. And it prompted her to think differently about herself, her worth, and the possibilities that life might still hold, which in turn motivated her to pursue opportunities she had long thought impossible, like completing the courses she had abandoned, and applying for scholarships that would have seemed laughable a year ago. Ethan, for his part, watched as Lina flourished, never overstepping, never pressuring, letting her make decisions, stumble, learn, and succeed on her own, and in turn, Lina began to trust not only him, but herself, more fully, recognizing that a person could support another without controlling them, and that accepting help didn't diminish strength. It simply allowed room for growth and connection, and together, they experienced the awkward, beautiful, and transformative process of building a partnership founded on understanding, respect, and shared humanity. One evening, after a long day filled with laughter, frustration, and small victories at the center, Ethan invited Lina to dinner at his home, something simple, casual, and free of expectation. And as she walked through the door, Mia ran to greet her with a hug so tight it left Lina momentarily breathless, and Ethan watched with quiet contentment, seeing the bond that had grown naturally between them. A bond that could not be hurried, forced, or bought, but had been nurtured with patience and care. Over dinner, they talked about the future, but not in abstract or overwhelming terms, simply in ways that acknowledged hopes, dreams, and fears. And Lina realized that for the first time, she felt safe enough to consider long-term plans, not just day-to-day. Survival, because the foundation beneath her was steady and kind, not built on fear, debt, or obligation, and the confidence she felt was mirrored in Ethan, who admitted that opening his life to someone else had been frightening, especially after all he had endured as a single father. But the trust and patience Lina had shown, along with her compassion and resilience, had made it possible, proving to him that genuine connection could overcome years of doubt and hesitation. In the following weeks, their bond deepened further, with each small act of care and understanding reinforcing the trust that had already formed, whether it was Ethan noticing Lina's favorite tea and ordering it in advance, or Lina quietly supporting him during stressful work calls while maintaining her own commitments at the center. And these gestures, though seemingly minor, created a rhythm of life that was steady, supportive, and deeply satisfying. And through this rhythm, Lina began to see herself not just as someone who had survived adversity, but as someone capable of shaping her own life, inspiring others, and contributing meaningfully to the world around her. And Ethan, in turn, recognized that his life had gained a depth he had not expected, a richness born not from wealth or title, but from trust, shared responsibility, and the simple act of being present for someone else without expectation. It was during one rainy afternoon, echoing the weather of their first meeting, that Lina and Ethan returned to the cafe where everything had begun. Not out of nostalgia alone, but to acknowledge how far they had come together. And as Lina ordered her drink confidently, not counting pennies but appreciating the choice, Ethan watched her with quiet pride, understanding that she had grown immensely since that first tentative, anxious day. And as they sat together, the soft hum of the cafe surrounding them, Lina realized that what had started as a chance encounter with $5, a blind date gone, wrong, and a man noticing her struggle had blossomed into a profound partnership grounded in kindness, respect, and shared humanity. And in that ordinary yet extraordinary moment, she understood that life, even when filled with hardship, held opportunities for grace and transformation when people chose to see one another fully and act with compassion. And she felt a quiet but undeniable certainty that whatever challenges lay ahead, she would no longer face them alone, because she had found someone who saw her for who she was, not what she had. And that realization, more than anything else, filled her with hope, courage, and a sense of belonging she had never experienced before. Years passed, and Lina Carter could scarcely recognize the timid, anxious girl she had been when $5 and a blind date had brought her to that small cafe, because life had unfolded in ways she had never imagined, shaped by choices, resilience, and the quiet kindness of a man who had once simply noticed her. Ethan Hale, who remained steadfast not only as a father, but as a partner who never demanded more than she could give, who never defined her worth by her past or her bank account. And together they built a life where respect, trust, and mutual support formed the foundation, allowing Lina to step into opportunities she had once thought impossible, like completing her education, mentoring young women at the community center, and even running programs that gave other children the same guidance and encouragement she had once received. And while the work was challenging, it was also deeply rewarding, a testament to how far she had come and the difference that consistent care and belief could make in a person's life. And Ethan watched her navigate these successes with pride, never overshadowing her, never insisting she accept help she didn't want, but always present as a steadying force when needed. And it was this balance that made their bond extraordinary, because it was built not on dramatic gestures or sudden wealth, but on daily choices, the small acts of recognition and support that became a pattern of love, partnership, and family. And even Mia, now older and wise beyond her years, celebrated the relationship by sharing her own thoughts and feelings freely, trusting Lina as she did her father, reinforcing the sense of stability and belonging that had been missing for both Lina and Ethan in their past lives. And it was in these moments that Lina realized the true meaning of kindness, that it was not about heroism or charity, but about seeing, hearing, and valuing another human being fully. A lesson she now applied in every aspect of her life, whether in her work, her friendships, or her daily interactions with strangers who needed acknowledgement and empathy. One afternoon, during a rainy season that reminded her of the first day she had met Ethan, Lina returned to the same cafe alone, reflecting on the journey from uncertainty and fear to confidence and purpose, remembering the $5 she had once clutched as if they were her last lifeline, and how that small amount of money had felt like the sum of all her courage. And she smiled at the thought of the man at the next table who had chosen to notice her instead of looking away, who had quietly intervened without fanfare, giving her not just help, but dignity. And she realized that act, seemingly minor, had set in motion a chain of events that transformed her life entirely, because kindness, when genuine, has a way of multiplying, of shaping futures in ways that can never be fully measured. Over time, Lina and Ethan faced challenges that tested their patience, resilience, and commitment, from the pressures of Ethan's high-profile career to the complexities of single parenthood and the occasional insecurities Lina felt when comparing herself to a world that often valued wealth over character. But they met each obstacle with honesty, communication, and the awareness that they were stronger together. And in that shared strength, they discovered a deeper understanding of love, not the fleeting, dramatic kind often depicted in stories, but a steady, grounding connection that offered safety, encouragement, and the freedom to grow. A love that allowed Lina to pursue her ambitions without fear, and Ethan to parent and lead without compromise. And as they navigated life's everyday moments, dinners at home, volunteering at the center, weekend walks, quiet conversations over tea, their bond became a testament to the power of patience, empathy, and unwavering attention to another's humanity. And it was in these ordinary, repeated actions that the extraordinary emerged. A life that neither could have imagined on that rainy day when $5 had seemed like everything and nothing all at once. One evening, Lina stood at the window, looking out at the familiar street where she had once counted her coins and rehearsed her courage, and she noticed children laughing, couples walking, strangers passing, and she felt the same quiet certainty she had felt the day Ethan first invited her to sit near the window, that small, intentional acts of kindness could change lives, could restore hope, could create ripple effects far beyond what anyone could see, and she understood that her own life, transformed by attention, respect, and care, was living proof of that truth, and that she could now carry it forward to others, teaching, mentoring, and modeling the same principles for those who might feel invisible, forgotten, or powerless. As she turned, Ethan entered, carrying Mia in his arms, and they laughed together over a shared story from the day, a moment filled with the kind of warmth that only comes from deep connection. And Lina realized that life, with all its uncertainties and hardships, had become full of meaning, joy, and purpose, and the journey from the girl who had feared $5 would never be enough to the woman who now shaped lives and inspired hope, had been guided by the subtle, life-changing power of noticing, choosing to care, and offering help without expectation. And in that living room filled with laughter, love, and quiet contentment, Lina held Ethan's hand, looked at Mia, and felt the profound truth that some encounters, no matter how small or accidental, carry the potential to rewrite an entire story. That courage combined with kindness can unlock doors, restore dignity, and build a future brighter than anyone could imagine. And she smiled, knowing that the blind date that had seemed so hopeless, the $5 she had clutched nervously, and the man at the next table who chose to watch, had not just changed her night, but had changed her life forever, proving that even in a world that often feels indifferent, attention, empathy, and quiet generosity remain the most powerful forces for transformation, and that by recognizing the humanity in others, we create ripples that extend far beyond ourselves, touching lives, building connections, and shaping the future in ways unseen yet deeply felt. And as the rain traced gentle patterns down the window once more, Lina knew with certainty that she would spend her life not only honoring the kindness she had received, but passing it on, inspiring others to notice, care, and act, because the smallest acts, offered without expectation, can change everything. If this story inspired you, like the video and subscribe to Soul of Kindness to keep spreading heartwarming stories that remind us how simple acts of kindness can transform lives.